Hello YouTube divers, this is WaterDive 122 and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today we are going to be re-ranking the 19 studio albums from my favorite band of all time, Rush. Now, I did a two-part video sometime last year where I ranked the Rush discography from my least favorite to my favorite. I'm gonna re-rank them here, and I'm gonna try and get all the albums in one video instead of two. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Rush has a lot of albums, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into the video. My opinions on some of the albums have changed, so here we go. Number 19 is Test for Echo from 1996. Yeah, it's still my least favorite Rush album. In my opinion, it's a little bit forgettable. The band's not really in their prime here. Of course, this would be their last album until Vapor Trails, because Neil had a lot of big tragedies in his life, losing his wife and daughter in the same year. I think it was after the tour of this album. He got out on his motorcycle all by himself with nothing but a backpack and a motorcycle, and he rode all the way across Canada and back, which inspired his novel Ghost Rider, and of course the song Ghost Rider, which was off the Vapor Trails record. We'll get to that later. But getting back to Test for Echo, this album just feels very disjointed at times. It feels rather inconsistent. The songwriting is not really that great, especially on Dog Ears, which is abysmal. Like, it is the worst song Rush ever made. I'm sorry, but it's easily the worst song Rush ever released. I absolutely cannot stand that freaking song. But it does have its moments on here, like the title track is great. Driven, although sounds a little bit like Tool, still a great song, one of the classics off of here. The Color of Right is a great song. Resist is a beautiful ballad. Virtuality is a great song. And my favorite track on here, Half the World, it's really great. But this album just is way too inconsistent. It's way too long. It's not that memorable. And really, it just feels like a grunge album than a Rush album, if that makes sense. So for that reason, Test for Echo coming here at number 19. Number 18 is Roll the Bones from 1991. Now, I know there are a lot of fans of this album, and I understand. I don't hate this album by any means. There's no such thing as a bad Rush album, in my opinion, at least. But Roll the Bones, in of its own self, it does not feel like a Rush album. Like, a lot of the albums Rush put out between Signals and Counterparts, really, yeah, from Signals to Counterparts, just does not feel like Rush, even in the freaking slightest. Roll the Bones is one of those albums, obviously. It's not terrible. It still has some really great songs on here, like Dreamline, which is my favorite song on here, but again, it's better live than it is on the album. Frickin' Bravado is great. Where's My Thing is a great instrumental. Neurotica is a guilty pleasure of mine. You Bet Your Life's pretty good, and Ghost of a Chance is objectively one of the best songs they ever wrote. But overall, Roll the Bones, it's a fun album at times. It's just kind of whatever for me. Number 17 is Vapor Trails from 2002. Now, this is a little bit of a shake-up from the original rankings because I had this a spot higher. But because I've shifted some albums around since the previous video, it has to fall back just a little bit. But it's still a great album, especially that second side with Secret Touch to Out of the Cradle. I love all those songs in that stretch. Even the first side's got some real bangers, like One Little Victory, which was really, in my opinion, Rush saying, like, we're back and we're ready to kick some butt, just like old times. And I really like that statement. How It Is very special to me because I actually saw them play this song live on the R40 tour, and that was very, very cool. Then you have Ghost Rider, which I talked about on the Test for Echo record. If you know the history of this song alone should get you to at least listen to it. It's a little long, I won't lie, and that's the main issue that I have with this record. It's no longer the production, because the production is fantastic. I mean, at least it's good, not fantastic. I'm sorry. And so basically, the main issue I have with this album now is the length. Some songs could be trimmed or just cut down a little bit, but overall, it's not a bad experience. Number 16 is "Hold Your Fire" from 1987. Yep, this one falls back a spot down too, because this album's good. Like Time Stands Still, Force 10, Mission, Prime Mover, Second Nature. All the tracks I really like. And then it has some filler tracks like Tai Shan and High Water and Turn the Page and some sections in Open Secrets. Really, this album, it's okay. For an 80s album, it's good. It gets a thumbs up for me. But as a Rush album, it does not feel like a Rush album. Not even in the slightest, in my opinion. Now we're moving on to number 15, which is Power Windows from 1985. Again, an album that fell back one spot compared to the original ranking. I still thoroughly enjoyed this record. It's very fun. It's very experimental, and I love it when bands try new things and mix up their sound. And Rush, no matter which era it is, it always works out for them. Even though I prefer one era over another, but then again, that's how it usually works, right? Power Windows does have some fun moments, like Big Money's got some great moments. Marathon is very fun. Mystic Rhythms is such a mesmerizing song. The music video is awesome for both Big Money and Mystic Rhythms. Both of them are awesome. Territories is a great song. Manhattan Project is a banger from this era. Really, this album has some great moments, but it does have some filler. Like, I don't really care for Territories that much. Like, I feel it's a little bit too long. Grand Designs has some forgettable moments in it as well. Even some parts in some of the better songs on here, like Mystic Rhythms is a little bit too long for me. Emotion Detector has some hit or miss moments, and really the album as a whole just does not correlate with me, if that makes sense. It just does not connect with me all the time, and that's why it's here at number 15. Number 14 is the debut album from 1974. I put this one at number 17 on the original ranking, and I was a fool. I love this album. Like, this is another one of my favorite debut albums of all time. I really gave it a lot of flack. I really slammed it for all those debut album cliches. But honestly, I love this album way more than I give it credit for. There are so many strong tracks on here. Like, yes, Rush does a lot of Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple stuff on this record, but I love all three of those bands. I love the sound of them. And of course, John Rutsey, while he's nowhere near as amazing as Neil Peart as a drummer, he still does his job. He holds down the fort. And of course, Geddy and Alex are just absolutely amazing on this record. I mean, from the classic song Working Man to Here Again to Finding My Way to Need Some Love to What You're Doing to my favorite song on here, which is Before and After. This album just feels awesome. What more do you want me to say? It's a great way to start this. It's a great way to start off a career. Number 13 is Presto from 1989. This one falls back 2 spots from the original ranking, and that is partially because the production has not aged well since my last listening of the album. While it still has some great tracks like Show Don't Tell and The Past, the title track, Red Tide, Available Light, Chain Lightning, it does suffer a little bit from lackluster production, but the songwriting is pretty cool. The band is tight on this album. Geddy Lee sounds awesome as a singer on this record. But overall, this album just feels very, like with Test for Echo, it feels very inconsistent at times. It does have some filler. Like Anagram for Mongo is a song I don't really care for. Hand Over Fist is okay, but nothing really more than okay. And Scars and Warpaint are just not really that memorable to me. I mean, they're not bad songs, but they're just very forgettable, to me at least. And Superconductor, like, can you make that a bonus track? If you really had the choice, could you have made that a bonus track? Because it's my least favorite song on the album, and I don't really give a crap about it. But overall, Presto's still a very solid album. It's just lackluster production and some filler on here. It drags it down just a little bit. Number 12 is Snakes and Arrows from 2007. Another guilty pleasure album for me. Again, I like the songs that made it onto their live CD way more than how they came out on the studio album. Like, I still love songs like Far Cry, Armor and Sword, Work in the Angels, basically the whole first side. Then songs on the second side like Hope, Faithless, and Malignant Narcissism. Very solid tracks as well. But I prefer all those songs as they were presented on the Snakes and Arrows live CD. So that's why it's here, number 12. Again, lackluster production. Geddy Lee's vocals are not really that strong in my opinion. But the drumming is pretty sick. The musicianship is pretty tight, as it always is. It's just a good album. Again, they did it better live than they did it here. So now, that brings us to number 11, the 1993 album Counterparts. I first heard this album when I was in 3rd grade, and oh my god, I love this album. It's heavy, it's punchy, it's very memorable to me. Especially when you look at songs like Stick It Out and Leave That Thing Alone, which is one of their greatest songs from this era. And easily the best instrumental from the 90s era. Animate is a very, very strong track. Between the Sun and Moon is an underrated banger. Speed of Love is great. Cold Fire is awesome. Really, there's not a bad song on this album, in my opinion. Really, the only song that has the potential of being a filler is the final track, Everyday Glory, which is probably the most forgettable out of all those songs. I mean, out of all the songs on the album. And then you have underrated gems like Cut to the Chase, which is awesomely good. Like, awesomely good. I love Counterparts. It's a great album. What more do you want me to say? It's the best album from the 90s era. Easily. Now, we're moving on to the top 10. Number 10 is Grace Under Pressure from 1984. Really, I believe the top 10 is where you're going to see, like, the least amount of changes. But Grace Under Pressure, solid album from start to finish. And if you disregard Signals, which we'll get to in a little bit, it's my favorite album from the 80s era. Like the heavy synth era. This is really them going into more of a very synth rock poppy sound. But two of my all-time favorite Rush songs are off this album, which are Distant Early Warning and Between the Wheels. I love those two songs, especially Between the Wheels, which, like I said in the original ranking, for a long time, it was my favorite Rush song, especially when I saw them play that song over the R40 tour in Greensboro, which is by far the best concert I have ever been to. Well, Rush is basically the only rock band that I have ever seen live, and I've seen them live twice. I saw them on their final 2 tours. Both were great experiences, but R40 was better, in my opinion, even though the Clockwork Angels show was very, very good in its own self. But yeah, getting back to Grace Under Pressure, I adore this album. And I can see why this album has so many diehard fans. Because the glossy production, the icy production, yeah, the happy music doesn't really correlate with the dark subjects that are being showcased throughout this album, but it's still a great blast of fun and joy every time I listen to this freaking album. It's a good time. It's a great time. Number 8 is Fly By Night from 1975, and while I'm here, I might as well talk about number 8. Number 9 is Fly By Night. Number 8 is Caress of Steel, both from 1975. I'm sorry. I like Caress of Steel a little bit more than Fly By Night, simply because I feel like the material on Caress of Steel is a little bit stronger than the material on Fly By Night. Fly By Night basically it's a near flawless album. The only issue I have with it is, in the end, lasted too long, and Making Memories was cut too short. Like, if they had made Making Memories just a little bit longer and, in the end, a little bit shorter, then the album would be perfect. But that's basically a nitpick, because this album still works really well regardless. And Caress of Steel, to me, it's just a great 5-track album. Like, you look at songs like freaking Necromancer and Fountain of Lamneth, which I've noticed a lot of people talking smack about. I really love those 2 tracks. I think they're among one of Rush's best epics. Now, they're not as good as like 2112 or the 2 Cygnus epics, but frick, they're freaking amazing. I'll be darned if they not be in the top 10 or whatever. Like, among their best songs. The Steel Day is a great song from Caress of Steel, and of course, Lakeside Park, one of my favorites. And I Think I'm Going Bald is a great bluesy number about getting old in life. Even though it does tend to rip off the riff to In the Mood from the first album, if you look at it from a lyrical point of view, I Think I'm Going Bald, lyrical-wise, is one of the best songs they ever made. Like, hands down. Now, with Fly By Night, it actually feels a little bit thirsty. Like, the band shows off what they could do when they have Neil Peart in the lineup on Fly By Night, and in my opinion, they do that even better on the Caress of Steel album. So that's why I like Caress of Steel just a little bit more than Fly By Night. But these 2 albums are almost identical in my love for them. Now, number 7 is Clockwork Angels from 2012. I previously ranked this at number 6 on the original rankings. I still stand by everything I said about this album on that video. Still a fantastic album from start to finish. From here on out, these albums are pretty much perfect. I have a lot of nostalgia for this. I was 7 when this album came out in 2012. I saw them on this tour in Charlotte. That's the first time I saw Rush. And it was a great show. The string ensemble was such a nice touch. There are so many great tracks on here, ranging from Caravan to the title track to the Anarchist to Halo Effect to the Wreckers to Wish Them Well and to the beautiful goodbye song that is The Garden. I really feel like The Garden is basically Rush sending a message that they're saying goodbye to their career. Kind of like what Savatage did on Poets and Madmen with Back to a Reason. It's a very emotional, a very ballady-like song, and it really feels like that it's the end of a band's career. I nearly cried when I heard Back to a Reason by Savatage, because I was like, okay, that's the end of the road. That this is Savatage saying goodbye. It's such an emotional track. The same is true here for The Garden. It's such an emotional song. It's a great song, and that ending play out is just so beautiful. And it really feels like Rush is saying goodbye. And they actually did, because 2 years ago, Neil Peart sadly passed away due to a 3-year battle of brain cancer, which was very, very tragic. And basically, The Garden was their swan song, and oh my god, what a way to go out. What a way to go out. Like, Rush did it so well. This is their heaviest album. It's their darkest album. It's their only concept album, and it is my favorite concept album of all time. I love Clockwork Angels to death. It is such a great record. And I would actually say it's tied with Caress of Steel as being their most underrated album to me. So, yeah, Clockwork Angels coming in here at number 7. Number 6 is Permanent Waves from 1980. Now we're getting into the classic era. I love Permanent Waves. It has grown on me a lot. Like Spirit of Radio, Free Will, frickin' Natural Science. All the tracks I really like on this record. Same thing with Entre Nous, which is probably my second favorite song on the album behind Spirit of Radio. The only reason why I don't really have this album in my top 5 is because Different Strings just kind of drags on a little bit too much, even though it's a very good song. Same thing with Jacob's Ladder. It feels like it is way too long than what it has basically given to, and I wish Geddy Lee actually had more vocal lines on that song. Now, I did see them play that song on the R40 tour, which was absolutely amazing. But overall, Permanent Waves coming in here, number 6. It's a great album. Now, top 5. Basically, these albums have just stayed the same, so I'm going to make this brief. Number 5 is Feral to Kings. Number 4 is Signals. Number 3 is Moving Pictures. Number 2 is 2112. And number 1 is Hemispheres. So let's talk about these albums a little bit. So Feral to Kings, the reason why I have it here at number 5, while it does boast some amazing bangers like Xanadu and Cygnus X1, Book 1, The Voyage, and some amazing, and the song that basically introduced Rush to the radio world with Closer to the Heart, and of course, 2 other great shorter songs with Cinderella Man and the title track. Madrigal, in my opinion, is the only weak side of Feral to Kings, and in my opinion, that's what holds it back from being any higher. But it's still a great album. It's still a good song from a great album. Now, number 4 is Signals. The reason why I have this at number 4, not any higher, because, well, I do love this album. It's easily my favorite from the synth era. It's pretty much a perfect album. Everyone talks about Subdivisions and how it's the best song on the album. It's definitely up there for me. It's not my favorite. It's my second favorite. My favorite song on this album is the amazing ballad Losing It. And the only issue I have with this album is that Countdown is a little bit forgettable, and I kind of wish they made that as a bonus track and had Losing It as the closer, because in my opinion, Losing It would just be an amazing closure for this album. The violin solo by Ben Mink on that song is just mind-blowing. It's just crazy. One of the rarest times where Rush actually had a guest star play on a song of theirs. So, of course, and so that's basically why Signals is here at number 4. Now, Moving Pictures is here at number 3 because while it is pretty much a perfect album, while it's a classic for a reason, I just feel like it just did not end the way it started. Like, as much as I really like Vital Signs, it just did not end with a banger like how Tom Sawyer started the album with a banger. I've seen live videos of Vital Signs being having like this big finish, and I kind of wish they did that on the album, but it still works. Moving Pictures is still a freaking classic. I love that album, and if you have it at number 1, good for you. Number 2 is 2112, and the only reason why it is not number 1 is because there is one song on there that I don't really care that much about, and that is Twilight Zone. It still serves its purpose, and it's still a very good song, but it just feels like a drawback to what the rest of the album have to offer, like specifically the second side with bangers like Passage to Bangkok, Lessons, Tears, and Something for Nothing. All those are great songs, and of course I don't even have to mention the masterpiece of a title track. Side 1 is masterpiece of a song that side 1 is the title track. Don't even need to mention it. And of course, number 1, Hemispheres from 1978, my favorite album of all time. If you want, I'm going to keep this one quick because I already did a whole album review of this album. I've talked this album to death. This album's flawless. Like, this is a perfect album within a perfect album within a perfect album, if that even makes sense. Like, Sing This X1 Book 2, my favorite Rush song, my favorite song by anybody. I adore that song a lot. Geddy Lee is just in his prime. The production is sick on this album. I love the production on here. And the two shorter tracks, Circumstances and The Trees, are both absolute freaking amazing songs. And then La Via Strangiato to close off the album. My favorite instrumental of all time. Best production, the best performances, the best songwriting, the best everything on this album. Like, Hemispheres does everything right. And that is why it is my favorite album of all time. What did you think about this Rush ranking list? Did you like this one? Did you like the old ranking? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, post your Rush rankings in the comment section. I would definitely be very interested in seeing those. So with that said, that concludes this edition of Magic Metal Mondays. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Water Dive 122 signing out, ready to dive and more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.